A woman with chronic pain for 12 years walks into a clinical trial. She receives a sugar pill, nothing more than compressed lactose and starch. Within weeks, her pain diminishes by 60%. The doctors are baffled. She is ecstatic. But here's the twist. She knew it was a placebo. She knew there was no active ingredient. And yet, her body healed anyway. How is this possible? And what does this tell us about the relationship between our minds, our bodies, and perhaps something even deeper? Welcome to Logic Over Spirit. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating phenomena in all of medicine and human experience, the placebo effect. This isn't just about fake pills and medical trickery. This is about the profound mystery of how belief, expectation, and consciousness itself can trigger genuine, measurable healing in the human body. For centuries, we've drawn hard lines between mind and body, between the physical and the spiritual, between what science can measure and what faith claims to accomplish. But the placebo effect stands at the intersection of all these domains, challenging our assumptions and forcing us to reconsider what we think we know about healing, consciousness, and the very nature of reality itself. We're going to explore this phenomenon from two angles that rarely speak to each other: the rigorous world of philosophy and the transformative realm of religious experience. What we'll discover is that the placebo effect isn't just a medical curiosity. It's a window into the deepest questions humans have ever asked about themselves. So let's begin this journey by asking, what exactly is happening when nothing becomes something, when belief becomes biology, when the immaterial creates material change? Chapter 1: The Paradox Unveiled. The placebo effect has haunted medicine since we first tried to separate real treatments from snake oil. In its simplest form, it describes a well-documented phenomenon. People get better from treatments that have no active therapeutic ingredient. But that definition barely scratches the surface of how strange and powerful this effect truly is. Let's look at what actually happens in the body during a placebo response. When patients believe they're receiving pain medication, their brains release endogenous opioids, natural painkillers more powerful than many pharmaceutical drugs. When Parkinson's patients receive placebo treatments, their brains increase dopamine production in the exact regions affected by their disease. Brain scans show real, measurable changes in neural activity, blood flow, and neurotransmitter levels, all triggered by belief alone. Think about that for a moment. Your expectation of healing can cause your brain to manufacture its own pharmacy of healing compounds. No external chemical intervention required, just belief. But here's where it gets even stranger. The placebo effect isn't just powerful, it's getting stronger. Over the past few decades, researchers have documented what they call placebo inflation. In antidepressant trials, pain studies, and other clinical research, the placebo response has been steadily increasing. People are getting better from fake treatments at higher rates than ever before. We're literally becoming more responsive to our own beliefs about healing. This phenomenon forces us into deeply philosophical territory. The 17th century philosopher René Descartes gave us the mind-body dualism that still shapes how most people think about themselves. Mind over here, body over there, two separate substances that somehow interact. As Descartes wrote, "I think, therefore I am," establishing consciousness as the foundation of existence, separate from the physical realm. But the placebo effect demolishes this neat separation. Here we have thoughts, expectations, and beliefs, things Descartes would classify as mental substance, directly causing physical, measurable changes in biological tissue. The boundary isn't just blurry. In the placebo effect, the boundary doesn't seem to exist at all. The philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty offered a different vision in his phenomenology of perception. He argued that we are not minds imprisoned in bodies, but rather embodied consciousness. The body is not something we have, it's something we are. As he put it, the body is our general medium for having a world. In this view, the placebo effect makes perfect sense. There is no mysterious leap from mind to matter because mind and matter were never separate to begin with. This isn't just abstract philosophy. It has profound implications for how we understand healing. If consciousness and biology are deeply intertwined, then the state of our consciousness, our beliefs, our expectations, our sense of meaning and purpose, these aren't just psychological factors. They're biological factors with real consequences for health and disease. Let me give you a concrete example that shows just how far this goes. In the 1950s, A physician named Bruno Klopfer treated a patient named Wright who had advanced lymphoma. Wright had heard about an experimental drug called cribiosin and begged to receive it. After his first injection, his tumors, which had been the size of oranges, melted away. But then Wright read news reports saying cribiosin was proving ineffective. His tumors returned. His doctor, recognizing what had happened, told Wright that he would receive a new, more potent version of cribiosin. Wright's tumors vanished again, but this time he had received only water. When definitive reports came out that cribiosin was worthless, Wright's faith collapsed, and he died within days. This story is both inspiring and terrifying. It reveals the extraordinary healing power available through belief, but also the potential for belief to harm. Wright's body responded to his mind's interpretation of reality, not to objective medical facts. His tumors were real, his remissions were real. But the active ingredient was his belief, not the medication. Chapter to Faith and Healing. Now let's turn to religion, because this is where things get really interesting. Every major religious tradition has healing practices based on faith, prayer, ritual, and belief. For thousands of years before modern medicine, these were the primary healing modalities available to humanity. And here's the uncomfortable question that the placebo effect raises. Were they working? Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but actually working through the same mechanisms we now call the placebo effect. Consider the healing miracles described in religious texts. In the Christian Gospels, Jesus repeatedly tells people that their faith has healed them. Your faith has made you well, he says again and again. Not I have made you well, but your faith. This puts the locus of healing power in the believer's own mind and spirit, activated or catalyzed by the healer's presence and authority. The sociologist Max Weber wrote about charismatic authority, the power that comes from being perceived as having a special connection to the divine or supernatural. He observed that charisma knows only inner determination and inner restraint. In other words, charismatic healing works through the internal psychological and spiritual state of the believer, not through any external mechanism. Could it be that Jesus, and countless other religious healers throughout history, were master activators of the placebo response? This doesn't diminish their significance. If anything, it makes them more remarkable. They somehow understood, long before neuroscience and clinical trials, how to trigger the body's self-healing capabilities through belief, ritual, and community. Every religion has its healing practices. Catholics have Lourdes, where millions have sought miraculous cures. Hindus and Buddhists have meditation practices that produce measurable changes in immune function and gene expression. Islamic traditions include spiritual healing through Quranic recitation and prayer. Indigenous shamanic traditions use elaborate rituals that alter consciousness and expectation. And here's what's fascinating: they all work to some degree. Not because their theological claims are all simultaneously true in some literal sense, but because they all tap into the same fundamental mechanism, the power of belief and expectation to alter biological reality. The philosopher William James, in his masterwork The Varieties of Religious Experience, argued that we should judge religious and spiritual practices by their fruits, their actual effects on people's lives, rather than by their theological truth claims. He wrote, "The only thing that matters is this: does it work? Does it produce the fruits of transformation?" From this pragmatic perspective, religious healing practices work not because they access supernatural intervention, but because they effectively harness natural mind-body processes that we're only now beginning to understand scientifically. They work because they create the psychological, social, and spiritual conditions that activate healing responses already present within the human body. But let's not be too quick to reduce religious healing entirely to placebo effects. There may be something more happening here, something that points to aspects of consciousness and reality that our current scientific frameworks haven't fully captured. Consider the practice of intercessory prayer, where one person prays for the healing of another. Some studies have shown modest positive effects even when the person being prayed for doesn't know about the prayers. These results are controversial and difficult to replicate, but they hint at the possibility that consciousness and intention might have effects that extend beyond the individual mind-body system. The Dalai Lama has said, if scientific analysis were conclusively to demonstrate certain claims in Buddhism to be false, then we must accept the findings of science and abandon those claims. This kind of intellectual humility is rare in religious discourse, but it points to an important truth. Genuine spirituality and genuine science are both committed to reality as it actually is, not as we wish it to be. What if the placebo effect reveals that there's more to reality than pure materialism suggests, but less than traditional supernatural claims propose? What if consciousness really does have causal power in the physical world, but that power operates through natural rather than supernatural mechanisms? This is where we need to get comfortable with mystery and ambiguity, something both rigid materialists and rigid fundamentalists struggle with. Chapter 3: Consciousness as Medicine. Let's go deeper into what the placebo effect reveals about the nature of consciousness itself, because once you really sit with these findings, they become almost impossible to reconcile with a purely mechanistic view of human beings. The standard materialist story goes like this: you're your brain, consciousness is what the brain does, and mental states are ultimately just patterns of neural firing. In this view, the placebo effect is somewhat awkward but not deeply troubling. It just shows that certain mental states, certain patterns of neural activity, can trigger cascades of biological changes in the body. The mind causes the body only in the sense that one part of your physical system, the brain, causes changes in other parts. But this explanation starts to strain when we look more closely at what actually happens. The placebo effect is not random neural noise triggering random biological changes. It's highly specific and precisely targeted. When you believe you've taken a pain reliever, your brain releases endorphins to the specific areas where you expect pain relief. When you believe you've taken a stimulant, your body produces stimulating effects. When you believe you've taken a sedative, you get sedating effects. Your conscious expectation, your mental model of what should happen, somehow directs your brain's pharmacy to produce exactly the right compounds in exactly the right doses to match that expectation. This is not just one brain region affecting another. This is consciousness programming biology with exquisite precision. The philosopher David Chalmers calls this the hard problem of consciousness. How and why does subjective experience arise from objective physical processes? But the placebo effect points to an even harder problem. How does subjective experience cause specific, targeted changes in objective physical processes? There's a philosophical position called neutral monism developed by thinkers like Baruch Spinoza and later William James and Bertrand Russell, which holds that mind and matter are not two different substances but two different aspects or perspectives on a single underlying reality. Spinoza wrote, "The mind and the body are one and the same thing, conceived first under the attribute of thought, second under the attribute of extension." In this view, when your belief heals your body, you're not bridging a gap between two separate realms. You're simply manifesting in the physical realm what is already present in the mental realm, because both are aspects of the same unified reality. This might sound mystical, but it's actually more in line with cutting-edge physics than old-fashioned materialism is. Quantum mechanics has shown us that consciousness and physical reality are entangled in ways that classical physics never imagined. The observer affects the observed, measurement changes what is measured. The clean separation between subject and object breaks down at the most fundamental level of physical reality. Now, I'm not claiming that quantum mechanics explains the placebo effect. That's usually where serious scientific discussion veers off into New Age pseudoscience. But I am saying that both quantum mechanics and the placebo effect point to the same uncomfortable truth. Consciousness is not some epiphenomenal byproduct of matter. It's fundamental to how reality operates. Here's a mini hook for you. In the 1990s, researchers discovered something called the nocebo effect, the placebo effect's evil twin. This is when negative expectations produce negative outcomes. In one study, patients who were warned about the side effects of chemotherapy experienced those side effects at much higher rates than patients who were warned even when they were receiving the exact same drugs at the exact same doses. Think about what this means. Your belief that something will harm you can actually make it harm you more. Your fear of symptoms can create symptoms. Your expectation of suffering can increase suffering. We are, to a frightening degree, creating our own reality through the lens of our expectations. The existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre argued that humans are condemned to be free, that we cannot escape the burden of choosing who we are and what our lives mean. But the placebo and nocebo effects suggest an even stranger form of freedom. We are, to some extent, choosing what happens in our bodies through the beliefs and expectations we hold. This is simultaneously empowering and terrifying. Empowering because it means we have more agency over our health and healing than we thought. Terrifying because it means we might also be unconsciously programming our own suffering and disease. Chapter 4: Implications and Integration. So where does all this leave us? What do we do with the knowledge that belief can heal? That consciousness shapes biology, that the line between mind and body is far blurrier than we thought. First, let's acknowledge what the placebo effect doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that all illness is psychosomatic or that people can simply think their way out of serious disease. Cancer, heart disease, infections. These are real biological events with real physical causes. The placebo effect is powerful, but it has limits. No amount of positive thinking will heal a broken bone or cure a bacterial infection on its own. But within those limits, the implications are revolutionary. Every healing encounter, whether with conventional medicine, alternative therapies, or spiritual practices, has a placebo component. The question is not whether we should try to eliminate this, we can't and shouldn't, but how we can ethically harness it to maximize healing. In conventional medicine, this means recognizing that the way a treatment is delivered matters as much as what the treatment is. The doctor's confidence, the patient's trust, the ritual and ceremony surrounding treatment, the story told about how healing will occur, all of these contribute to outcomes. As the physician Ted Kapchick, who has spent decades researching placebos, puts it, placebo studies are really about the drama of healing. The ethical challenge is how to harness placebo effects without deception. If I tell you that a sugar pill is a powerful pain reliever, and you believe me, it might actually relieve your pain, but I've lied to you. That's ethically problematic. Yet research shows that even when people know they're taking placebos, they still experience benefits. This phenomenon, called open-label placebo, suggests that the healing power comes not from deception but from engaging in a healing ritual with expectation and intention. For religious and spiritual healing practices, the placebo effect framework offers both validation and challenge. Validation because it confirms that these practices really do produce healing. That faith healing isn't just wishful thinking but a real phenomenon with measurable effects. Challenge because it suggests that the mechanism might be natural rather than supernatural, psychological rather than metaphysical. But here's a thought. Maybe the natural and supernatural aren't as separate as we think. Maybe what we call supernatural is just natural processes we don't yet fully understand. The philosopher Baruch Spinoza wrote, "By God I understand a being absolutely infinite. That is, a substance consisting of an infinity of attributes, of which each one expresses an eternal and infinite essence." In Spinoza's pantheistic view, God and nature are the same thing. The sacred and the material are unified. If we adopt something like this perspective, then harnessing the placebo effect isn't replacing God with psychology. It's recognizing that the healing power we attributed to divine intervention is actually the divine working through natural mechanisms that are built into consciousness and biology. The Buddhist concept of emptiness, or shunyata, teaches that phenomena have no independent, inherent existence but arise through interdependent causes and conditions. Your healing doesn't come from the pill alone, nor from your mind alone, nor from some external divine power alone. It emerges from the interaction of all these factors in a web of causation that includes your beliefs, your biology, your social context, the meaning you assign to your illness, the rituals you engage in, and yes, potentially, transcendent dimensions of reality we barely understand. What if the truth about healing is radically holistic? What if it requires engaging body, mind, spirit, and community all at once? What if the ancient healing traditions and modern medicine are both partially right and need to be integrated rather than placed in opposition? The psychiatrist and philosopher Iain McGilchrist argues in his work that the left hemisphere of the brain sees the world as a collection of separate, manipulable parts, while the right hemisphere perceives wholes, contexts, and connections. Our modern scientific medicine is brilliantly left hemispheric, breaking the body into systems, organs, cells, and molecules to understand and fix specific parts. But healing might require right hemispheric understanding too, seeing the person as a whole embedded in relationships, meanings, and purposes that extend beyond the merely physical. The placebo effect is a messenger from that more holistic way of seeing. It tells us that you cannot separate healing the body from healing the mind and spirit. It tells us that meaning matters, that story matters, that relationship matters, that ritual matters. These aren't just nice add-ons to real medicine. They are medicine. Conclusion. So where does this leave us in our exploration of where mind, body, and spirit manifest tangible healing. The placebo effect stands as undeniable proof that consciousness has causal power in the physical world. Your beliefs, expectations, and mental states don't just correlate with biological changes, they cause them. This fact challenges both reductive materialism and naive supernaturalism. It suggests that reality is stranger, more integrated, and more mysterious than either pure science or pure faith usually admits. The hard line between mind and matter, between spirit and flesh, between the subjective and objective, these lines are human constructs that don't reflect the seamless unity of actual experience. The philosopher Alfred North Whitehead wrote, "There is no nature at an instant. Reality is not a collection of frozen objects but a flowing process in which everything is related to everything else. In that process, consciousness is not separate from the physical world. It's woven into the very fabric of how the world unfolds moment by moment. What matters now is what we do with this knowledge. Do we use it to empower people in their healing journeys? Do we integrate the wisdom of ancient traditions with modern scientific understanding? Do we create healing environments and practices that honor the full complexity of human beings, body, mind, and spirit together? The choice is ours. But one thing is certain. We can never again pretend that healing is purely a mechanical process, that consciousness is irrelevant to biology, or that the power to heal doesn't reside, at least in part, within ourselves. As the physician and philosopher Albert Schweitzer once said, each patient carries his own doctor inside him. They come to us not knowing that truth. We are at our best when we give the doctor, who resides within each patient, a chance to go to work. The placebo effect is that inner doctor, awakened by belief, expectation, meaning, and perhaps something deeper still. It's been with us all along, waiting for us to recognize it, understand it, and learn to work with it wisely. Thank you for watching Logic Over Spirit. If this exploration opened your mind to new possibilities about the relationship between consciousness and healing, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries at the intersection of science, philosophy, and spirituality. And let me know in the comments, have you experienced the power of belief in your own healing journey? What role do you think consciousness plays in health and disease? Let's continue this conversation together. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep seeking truth wherever it leads.